Most mistakes don't begin with greed, they begin with trust. I didn't grow up in football and I wasn't chasing fame. I worked in finance, mortgages, risk, numbers that either worked or didn't. So when a friend called me one afternoon and said there was a kid I should meet, I listened. Not because it sounded exciting, but because it sounded possible. He told me the kid was 18 years old, from Uruguay, living in the United States. He said the kid had talent, real talent, the kind that doesn't show up on paper but shows up when the ball is at his feet. Then he said something that caught my attention. Europe pays differently. He explained that in the US, opportunities were limited. But in Europe, clubs were always looking, always testing, always willing to take a chance if the timing was right. He said if someone could get the kid in front of the right people, everything could change. I asked the obvious question, what's the risk? He paused for a moment, then laughed. Same as always, he said. But the upside is real. That night I thought about it. I ran numbers, costs, flights, time, worst case scenarios. By morning, I'd already made the decision. I said yes. At the time, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt practical, like any other calculated risk. What came next was anything but. The alarm went off at 2 o'clock in the morning. Not once. Every morning. I learned very quickly that if you want to reach European football clubs from the US, you have to live on their clock. 9 a.m. in Switzerland is the middle of the night back home. So I adjusted. I woke up quietly, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a phone. By 3 a.m., I started dialing. Most calls went nowhere. Voicemail, receptionists, polite dismissals. Some people were kind, some were rushed. A few laughed. One person told me to send an email. I already had. Day after day, I repeated the same routine. Call, introduce myself, explain the player, ask for 5 minutes. Weeks passed. My phone bill climbed past $3,000. I started to wonder if I was chasing something that didn't exist. Then one morning, a voice on the other end of the line sounded different. He didn't rush me. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said something simple. Have him come. We'll take a look. Just like that. A first division club. Northeast Switzerland. I booked the flights, hotels, train passes, meals. I paid for everything. Because that's what belief looks like at the beginning. You don't hedge it, you commit to it. We landed in early July. The air felt different, cooler, cleaner, green fields stretched out in every direction. Mountains in the distance that didn't look real. The club's coach met us himself. He shook my hand, then looked at the kid. Let's see what you can do, he said. For the first time, the dream stopped being theoretical. It was real. And it was moving fast. The first few days felt promising. The kid trained with the squad, not as a guest, not as a favor, as a player being watched. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just played. Simple passes, quick decisions, good movement off the ball, the kind of things coaches notice even when they don't say anything. During friendly matches, he held his own. Didn't shrink, didn't force it. After one session, the coach pulled me aside. He said they liked the kid, said they saw potential. Then came the condition. They wanted to place him with their second division side. 6 months, no salary, no guarantees, a free loan. If things worked out, we could talk later. If they didn't, we'd shake hands and move on. I thanked him for his honesty and asked for some time. That night, I went back to the hotel and did what I always did. I ran the numbers, flights, housing, food, training, insurance, then the part you can't quantify, risk, an injury, a change of staff, a coach who stops believing. 6 months is a long time to carry all of that with no protection. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't agree to it. That's when another name entered the conversation, a former professional player. Someone my friend knew from years earlier. someone with European experience. I'll call him Marco. Marco played in Switzerland. He knew clubs, he knew agents, he knew how things worked. At least that's what I was told. We met him a few days later. At first, Marco barely acknowledged the kid, barely looked at him during training. He spoke to me instead about football, about contacts, about opportunities. It all sounded reasonable, safe. Then someone mentioned the kid's former coach, a name Marco recognized. I watched his body language change, his posture straightened, his tone shifted. Suddenly, he was interested, very interested. He started watching the kid closely, asking questions, pulling him aside after training. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was professional curiosity. Then the meetings started happening without me. I'd look up and see them talking quietly on the far side of the pitch, lowered voices, quick glances in my direction. Marco began suggesting ideas. He talked about trials in other countries. Places with money, places moving fast. Saudi Arabia came up more than once. I asked him directly when we could arrange a trial with his own club. After all, that was the reason we'd come to see him. He brushed it off, said timing wasn't right, said budgets were tight. I didn't like the answer, but I didn't push. Not yet. I still believed we could work together, that this was the beginning of a longer relationship. So I kept him informed. Every call I made, every club I contacted, every agent who returned a message, I shared everything. What I didn't realize at the time was that while I was working in the open, other conversations were happening quietly. Conversations I wasn't part of. And by the time I started to feel that something was off, the ground had already begun to shift beneath my feet. By the end of the first week, something had changed. The kid was still showing up to training, still doing the drills, still playing in matches. But the energy was different. When I suggested other clubs, his responses became short, dismissive. He stopped asking questions, stopped engaging. When I pushed him about it, he got defensive, quick to anger, unwilling to explain. One afternoon, after a test match he barely seemed interested in, I asked him what was going on. That's when he finally said it. Marco told me, "I shouldn't trust you." He said, "You don't really understand how European clubs operate, that you don't have the right connections, that you're wasting time." I stood there listening, not because it hurt my pride, but because it explained everything. The missed effort, the sudden resistance, the quiet meetings I wasn't part of. I tried to talk it through, tried to remind him why we were there, what I'd already put into this. But the line had been drawn, and I hadn't drawn it. Despite that, I still believed we could salvage things. I believed Marco and I could work together, that if I stayed transparent, professional, reasonable, it would sort itself out. So I kept going. I kept making calls, kept arranging meetings, kept sharing information with him. And still, Marco never produced a single club willing to test the kid. Eventually, I found one myself, a club prepared to move forward. At that point, preseason was starting for Marco's team. He said he couldn't travel. Someone needed to handle the paperwork. So I did. I flew to Uruguay. I met with the kid's amateur club, handled the negotiations, paid 450,000 euros for the transfer certificate, out of my own pocket. The certificate was issued directly to the Swiss club and sent ahead. Clean, proper, no shortcuts. Before I left Uruguay, I emailed Marco all the details, every document, every confirmation. He knew exactly what had been paid. He knew exactly where the money came from. The understanding was simple. Any compensation from the Swiss club would come back to me. Then we'd sort it out fairly. I believed that. When I returned to Switzerland, I went straight to the club. That's when I learned the contract had already been signed. The kid had told them Marco was his sole representative. There was no transfer fee, only a finder's fee, 500,000 euros, paid to Marco and the kid. I remember standing there trying to process the numbers, trying to understand how something so clear had become so final. My expenses alone exceeded that amount. I hadn't just been cut out of the deal, I'd been erased from it. I left Europe shortly after that, flew back to the United States. Not angry, not shouting, not threatening legal action, just quiet. On that flight home, I had one thought. This had cost me money, but it had taught me something far more valuable, and next time, I wouldn't be walking in blind.